The current levels of pollution that we're all breathing are unacceptable, and we can't tolerate it more because it's killing us.
We deserve clean air now. We deserved it yesterday. Our children deserve it.
This is a paper towel off a screen from my bedroom window that I clean every week. I clean this crap off my window.
The Clairton Coke Works is one of the most toxic industrial facilities in Allegheny County.
I never missed a day running in New York City because the air smelled or because I felt like I had a breathing issue. In Pittsburgh, I've missed too many days to count.
The most livable city in America isn't livable if the air isn't breathable.
So welcome to the fire. Because we've been putting up with U.S. Steel's poor environmental record for 150 years now. My mother, who passed away last year from COPD, she never smoked a cigarette in her life, but we live right here, next to U.S. Steel.
Everybody in my family's been riddled with cancer. My brother just died of cancer.
Approximately 130,000 people live within a 5-mile radius of the Coke Works. People in this area have air that's worse than 91% of the entire country.
The children are being sickened. They're developing asthma at a very early age.
I am also the mother of 2, and I fear for my children's and my family's health.
I have a 5-month-old daughter who I'm scared to raise here in the city.
A year and a half ago, I was diagnosed with chronic bronchitis that is likely due to the poor air quality in Pittsburgh.
And I can't understand how there's not enough compassion to put a stop to this.
So welcome to the fire.
If you understand that your child's asthma is approximately the result of Norfolk Southern or is going to be exacerbated by it, then you're going to come to a meeting and raise your voice.
Where petrochemical development occurs, people tend to suffer.
This area has so much more to offer than becoming a cancer alley.
We've got our work cut out for us.
The county health department is in charge of enforcing our Clean Air Act and protecting our health. Do you think they're doing a good job? No!
This anger, anxiety, and frustration are the results of residents enduring decades worth of air pollution and violations.
It's on us to be bold, and it's also on us to listen to the needs of the people who are here. They are suffering.
Welcome to the fire. 'Cause the bigger they are, the harder they fall. You build your fortress and I'll climb your walls. You got your armor, but I see your flaws. So welcome to the fire.
We are starting to elect politicians who pay attention and fight hard for clean air. And if you do not fight hard for clean air, we're done with you.
We have to hold accountable those who are harming our communities.
So welcome to the fire.
For decades, we have not been able to breathe.
There is a legal and moral obligation to make the county act.
What do we want?
Clean air! Because cancer should not be the cost of breathing in America's most livable city.
Enough is enough. Hi, I'm Howard Rieger, founder and convener of Southwestern Pennsylvania Air Quality Town Halls. And I welcome all of you to our 11th program, Better Together, emphasizing the power of the collective. What makes this effort unique is that it is resident-led. It is our non-institutional structure that gives us the freedom to talk truth to power. When we held our first town hall 27 months ago, it was with a determination to make a sustained effort. And this is the ideal time to mark our progress to date. On the positive side of the ledger, we set out to amplify the voices of residents, especially those living in environmental justice communities, those closest to the worst sources of pollution, people living in Clairton and North Braddock and Hazelwood and uptown Pittsburgh. That meant, for the most part, spotlighting U.S. Steel and its ancient, poorly maintained Mon Valley Works, the Clairton Coke Works, 122 years old, the Irvin Works in West Mifflin, right across the river from Clairton, 85 years old, the youngster in the chain, and the Edgar Thompson Works in North Braddock, fully 148 years old. That's a total of 355 years. While you're absorbing that information, keep that in mind that U.S. Steel announced in May 2019 a plan to invest $1.5 billion to upgrade the Mon Valley Works, only to cancel that plan 2 years later. That was a classic page out of U.S. Steel's playbook of past delay strategies. In the wake of the explosion and fire at the Clairton Coke Works in December 2018, U.S. Steel had to buy time while they worked out a plan to exit the region, a plan being executed now, with U.S. Steel investing $6.5 billion in Arkansas in somewhat less polluting modern facilities in a right-to-work state. So they're abandoning the union as well. That information will help you understand one of our key failures later on in our self-evaluation. We explored the known dangers of air pollution with scientists and physicians. We engaged with voices of labor, past and present workers of the United Steelworkers Union, who worked for U.S. Steel, many of them in the Clairton Coke Works, and can testify and did testify to the duplicity of company operations. We benefited from the perspective of elected and appointed officials who saw the value of interacting with us because we are their constituents. We highlighted the work of Create Lab at CMU and its Smell Pittsburgh app, which has been utilized 70 or 80,000 times, developed in conjunction with the Allegheny County Health Department, but very rarely utilized by them in any meaningful fashion. We heard from resident members of the Beaver County Marcellus community about the dangers of our newest pollution threats associated with fracking and the related construction and now the operation of the Shell ethylene cracker plant in Beaver County, which during its self-proclaimed state-of-the-art operation has already been fined by the State Department of Environmental Protection for $10 million for exceeding its yearly allowable emission of volatile organic compounds in its first few months of operation. In the wake of the East Palestine rail disaster, we explored with Rail Pollution Protection Pittsburgh, RP3, the potential for a rail calamity right here in Pittsburgh and what could be done to reduce the odds of that happening. Last February, we sent a letter signed by 600 individuals to Region 3 Environmental Protection Administrator Adam Ortiz, inviting him to come to the Mon Valley to meet firsthand with residents and to view our worst sources of pollution. On May 2, he and his members of his team made that trip. And yet with all of that, we failed in at least 3 respects. We have not been able to overcome the unwillingness of the Allegheny County Health Department director to meet with residents, to hear their stories of air pollution-related misery. We have not been able to overcome the unwillingness of the Allegheny County Health Department to take advantage of the technological assets of our region to upgrade their operations. We have not been able to establish connections with regional leadership aimed at engaging in a dialogue about a healthier future for our region. The watchword has been silence. On the latter issue, we addressed what reason would seem to identify as the easiest place to begin such a discussion, with our massive healthcare establishment, as represented by Allegheny Health Network, and University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. But that too has proven to be impossible. So that leaves the question, why the silence? Because our region operates as if U.S. Steel is still a sacrosanct subject, never to be talked about. Old habits die hard. That doesn't mean that we've given up on that goal, and that is what you'll hear about next. And after that, we'll hear a patient-centered view of health consequences of air pollution from the perspective of a physician and residents who have borne the brunt of that burden. And we'll close the formal part of the town hall with a very important review of the responses that we have gotten to our Allegheny County Executive Candidate Questionnaire, which addresses weaknesses at the Allegheny County Health Department, our Air Pollution Enforcement Authority, and what the candidates propose to do about it. As always, we'll conclude with an open question and answer period, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say on the other side. Now, on with the show.
I am co-founder and general counsel of Rail Pollution Protection Pittsburgh, RP3. Our mission is to counteract the risk and impacts that expanding rail transport have on adjacent communities in terms of health, safety, and air and water quality. We are also one of the dozen members of the Air Quality Steering Committee, and we're a member of the Intergovernmental and Corporate Clean Air Caucus. Our Air Quality Steering Committee is comprised of grassroots organizations and community advocates who join together to demonstrate through our town halls that we are truly better together. This was necessary because Pittsburgh and our surrounding region is simply an unhealthy place to live and to work. Why is this the case? It's because polluters are enabled. We know one thing that would help make it better, and that is having our nonprofit healthcare organizations step up and take a leadership role, rather than merely building cancer centers and profiting from all of the illnesses. Stepping up is necessary because right now, more than ever, your immediate and long-term health depends on your zip code. Our healthcare provider networks are in a prime position to engage in a dialogue with these communities. We can help. Pittsburgh had healthcare network leaders from all over the country come here for a 3-day conference last month, sponsored by Clean Med. This was the premier national conference for leaders in healthcare sustainability. Representatives from UPMC and AHN attended. What did they learn? Listen to what one of the speakers said, quote, "Where we live, the places we work, and the air we breathe profoundly impact our health. We know one way to improve the health of the more than 68 million people who live in the communities we serve is by improving their environmental conditions. To create a healthier, more sustainable path forward, we must address the inseparable issues of climate change, pollution, and public health. The climate crisis has profound implications for human health, and these health impacts are not uniformly experienced. Race is the most accurate predictor of proximity to facilities that produce toxic waste like carbon dioxide and methane, which are the top drivers of climate change, as well as other pollutants that make environmental risks to health especially high for those who are Black, Indigenous, Latinx, and people of color. Our vision is to ensure researchers, philanthropists, policymakers, and our communities understand the existing evidence base around climate change and pollution-related health impacts and adaptation strategies. This vision also includes utilizing the aggregated information as a foundation for stronger climate and health communications and policies, unquote. Well, was this statement made by UPMC or AHN? The answer is no, it was not. It was made by Kaiser Permanente, the largest nonprofit integrated healthcare network in the country. And they have been reaching out about pollution and health impacts in environmental justice communities for the last 20 years. This is how a true nonprofit operates. Unlike UPMC, who refuses to acknowledge the impact of pollution on health and instead turns the healthcare dollars they earn from those illnesses into a practically untaxed real estate empire worth a staggering $2.5 billion. Recently, the founder of Clean Med and Practice Green Health gave out environmental excellence awards to 25 of the leading US healthcare networks, honoring their sustainability commitment. These 25 award recipients demonstrate the kind of leadership, innovation, and performance that can drive the entire health sector toward more environmentally responsible practices and a more expansive definition of health. In addition to the top 25, Practice Green Health recognized an additional 368 healthcare organizations across 11 areas of sustainability through their annual Environmental Excellence Award Program. You guessed it, neither UPMC nor AHN made the cut for any of these awards. At my presentation at the Clean Med conference, I asked that if there were any UPMC and AHN executives in the audience that thought like Kaiser Permanente, I'd like to meet with them after my presentation. I got crickets. I also invited those UPMC and AHN leaders at the conference to have a seat at our air quality table, and once again, crickets. In contrast, throughout the Kaiser Permanente region, you will hear Kaiser Permanente alerts about the impact of wildfire smoke on health and the precautions that must be taken. What do we hear from UPMC and AHN about this issue? Crickets. What we have heard from UPMC and AHN about our repeated invitations to meet with us and with elected representatives on the Air Quality Clean Air Caucus. Crickets. This is unacceptable, and we need your help. Enough is enough. I'll tell you what we do here and read over and over is the very bad press about Dr. Lukatich and federal Medicare fraud allegations. This is a public relations nightmare for UPMC. Before I retired, Fortune 500 companies used to pay for my advice. But here's some free advice that makes some business sense. Take a seat at the air quality table and take advantage of the opportunity for some good leadership, public relations throughout the region. This is a chance to fill the void left by the inaction of our Allegheny County Health Department. Since I am the world's optimist, I do have some hope. Last September, UPMC appointed John Krolnicki as Chief Administrative Sustainability Officer, whom I invited to attend today's Zoom. He is charged with developing a comprehensive strategic plan to achieve environmental goals that are currently related to reducing UPMC's carbon footprint. It's a start, but there is so much more to be done. Is John here? The answer is crickets. But in all fairness to John, he had rather short notice. So Howard will share the history of our outreach efforts with our healthcare networks, and we will provide you with an action item link for a petition that we will put in the chat. Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. I'm just going to be very brief, just to give you a history of the sequence of our attempted communications with AHN and UPMC. Back on November 8th of 2021, we sent certified letters to the chairs of the board and the president and CEOs of both organizations, return receipt requested, so we know that the letters got delivered. We got no answer. We tried to reach out to those individuals, but it's really impossible to get email addresses, telephone numbers, call the switchboard. Nobody's going to put that call through. We then resent those letters without going certified, thinking that, well, worth another try. No answer. We then got on the websites of both organizations thinking, well, the one thing that hospital systems love is public relations, if it's good. So we were able to track down the names of the key personnel that dealt with those issues. And we sent communication to Dan Laurent, the Vice President of Internal and External Communications at Allegheny Health Network, and to Paul Wood, the Chief Vice President and Chief Communications Officer, UPMC. No response. So our answer today is what Glenn just mentioned, to establish a petition, which we're going to post in the chat. We'll post it on a number of occasions during this Zoom meeting, and hope that you'll be able to not only sign on to it, but share it with others. We do plan, subsequent to this meeting, to run a short ad in a variety of local print communications that will at least get the attention of UPMC about some of the bad publicity they might wish they could avoid. And we'll just keep hammering away. So that's our sequence of events. And now I'll turn it over to Dr. Deborah Gentile, who's going to make a presentation about the realities of air pollution, how it impacts her patients.
Good evening, everyone. This is Dr. Deborah Gentile. As you may know, I'm a pediatric allergy and asthma physician who spent nearly a decade trying to better characterize the impact of air pollution on poor asthma outcomes in our region. You may have heard me speak in the past, including at several of these events, about the medical as well as public health facts regarding air pollution in our region and asthma outcomes. Tonight, I want to share more of a personal perspective with you, what it's like to be a physician and see patients who reside in the Mon Valley near point sources of pollution and how it impacts their asthma. This is the only slide you're going to see written material. Everything else is going to be photos and just my words. I just want to remind you that my work has shown that the childhood asthma prevalence in the Mon Valley is approximately 22.4%. That's 2 to 3 times higher than the county, state, and national rates that are reported at 8 to 10%. My work has shown that this is due to poor disease control that's exacerbated by air pollution in these children. Additionally, we've done a follow-up study after the Clairton Coke Works fire that showed adults had a near doubling in acute asthma attacks related to those air pollution levels following that industrial accident. These are facts. It's very well established that air pollution triggers asthma, particularly in our area. I just want to remind you what it's like to have an asthma attack. It's a very frightening experience for anyone who's seen it, and certainly for the patient. Basically, when you're having an asthma attack, your breathing tubes or your airways tighten and they get filled with mucus, and it's hard to move air out and in. Patients will be gasping for air and they're not able to get any. This can lead to more stress, which then can lead to worsening of the attack. Many patients describe the sensation as breathing through a straw. It's very frightening. If you're not able to get enough air in, you can actually suffer lack of oxygen and even pass out from it and have serious complications. Patients who have asthma, whether they're children or adults, it severely impacts their life. Children are often not performing well in school because they're not sleeping well at night. Children with asthma often have more school absences, and they often don't perform as well in school as their peers who don't have asthma. This translates to learning issues. This also translates to their ability to gain post-secondary education and good paying jobs. On the family end, parents or guardians of children with asthma are often having to miss work because of their child's asthma, or if they themselves are an adult with asthma and they're having uncontrolled disease, they're missing work. This can cause a variety of stressors, including psychological, as well as financial stressors for the family. Many times parents will need to take family medical leave, and they may run out of it due to the seriousness of their child's asthma or even their own asthma. This can create a tremendous burden for the family. Anyone with asthma can be triggered by exercise. One of our goals was controlling asthma is that you should be able to run and play and do whatever physical activity you want. However, many times patients with asthma are poorly controlled and they're sitting on the sidelines. They're not able to participate in sports. This can actually have a cascading effect so that they're not active, and it can be a setup for diabetes, obesity, and even heart disease as they get older. This can certainly play a major role in their future health problems. I alluded to this earlier, but families that have someone with uncontrolled asthma in it are often not sleeping at night. I've had multiple families where they are at wit's ends, and one parent, if they're able to, has considered or even actually quit their job to provide care for the patient at night. Asthma always worsens at night, and that's because naturally our anti-inflammatory chemicals decrease at night. So that's when most attacks occur. Children who are having asthma attacks at night, again, aren't going to be able to function well in school. Parents are going to be exhausted. They're not going to be able to perform well at work, and they're even going to have difficulty keeping up with their other home activities. So again, a very tremendous impact on life. Unfortunately, children who have asthma often have social interactions impacted. Again, many times children with asthma are going to have issues with exercise if they're not controlled, and they're not going to be participating with the other children then in sports. They can feel isolated and alone. Also, they may be missing school because of attacks or doctor's visits and hospitalizations. So that can lead them to feelings of social detachment. Teenagers have a particular issue here because many times they're embarrassed by their disease. They may not want their peers to know that they have asthma and are trying to hide it from them. They may not carry an inhaler and use it if needed because they don't want others to know. This could have deadly impacts. As a physician, one of the biggest issues that frustrates me is when we educate patients on how to control asthma. We basically focus on measuring how well they're controlled and continuing to monitoring them. For them, that means taking their medications and following up for visits. We spend a lot of time trying to control factors to contribute to their asthma severity. And I'll discuss these in a few minutes, but this is my area of frustration. We also want to educate for a partnership and make sure we're giving them appropriate drugs to control their problem. When we're trying to control asthma triggers, the most frustrating part of air pollution is that the families have no control over their exposure to this. Many of the other triggers they have control over. They can certainly make sure their child is immunized for flu and COVID to decrease respiratory infections. You can avoid tobacco smoke. You can avoid strong fumes in the house with cleaning supplies or fragrances. You can actually do remediation if you have mold damage. You can actually remediate for dust mite, cockroaches, and even pests. Those are things that are under a family's control. However, air pollution isn't. This is one of the most frustrating things as a physician to watch families try to control. This is very much a public health problem, and it's low-lying fruit. And what we need is our regulators to take control of the situation and protect everyone, not just those with asthma, but those with other respiratory diseases and cardiovascular disease, and vulnerable populations like children and older adults. They're all at risk for problems related to air pollution, and they have no direct control over this. It's an extremely frustrating problem for both me as well as the families that are managing this. I don't like to end on a sad note, but I think it's important in this case. Many people view asthma as an episodic disease, and you can have an attack and you get better. And they tend to forget it's life-threatening. I, unfortunately, have taken care of patients who have ended up in the ICU due to exposure to asthma triggers, including air pollution in our local area. And it saddens me that this happens. And unfortunately, we still have deaths due to asthma in the United States. About 3,500 patients a year in the US still die due to asthma. And that's despite having wonderful access to medications as well as world-class physicians. They are exposed to triggers that they're not able to control, including air pollution. And unfortunately, this can result in emergency room visits, ICU hospitalizations, and unfortunately, death. It's very much time that we take this problem seriously and ask our public health officials and our medical centers to become more involved in protecting our vulnerable populations from the poor air quality that they're breathing on a regular basis. Thank you for your attention.
Next up, we have Qiyam Ansari. Qiyam.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to come on and speak today. My name is Qiyam Ansari. I'm a resident of the Mon Valley. I currently live in West Mifflin. So I'm nestled right in between the Braddock plant and the Clairton Coke Works. So tons of fun for me. I'm here to talk to you guys a little bit about my experience having asthma and living in the Mon Valley. Before I get started with my story that I would like to tell you, I want to give a little context as far as asthma medications and how my asthma was before I came to Pittsburgh in 2010. And so my asthma is caused by certain environmental triggers such as mold and pollen. So cutting the grass is going to make me have an asthma attack when it's, snowing outside with the pollen, I'm going to start wheezing. If I'm inside a moldy house, in a basement. Those were typically the only times I'd have asthma. So I'd get around the trigger, I'd have to take my inhaler. Typically, I'd be good. I was a, healthy child growing up, played sports, was outside all the time. And so, my asthma was definitely a factor, but, I thought it was growing out of it until I moved here. So I moved here in 2010, and in 2013, I had an asthma attack, which ultimately ended up in my early death, resuscitation, and a visit to the ICU, and being put in a medicated coma, essentially. And so just to start off and tell you the story. So for my asthma, I need to carry my emergency inhaler around with me everywhere I go. It's essentially like my phone before I had a phone, right? It's always on me, and essentially it's my lifeline. So one day, we had to move. We were living in North Versailles. We had to move to McKeesport, not too far. It's maybe like a mile and a half, still in the Mon Valley. I moved on an inversion day, right? So the air quality was orange and red that day. And we ended up moving, me being a teenager who packed by throwing everything into trash bags and boxes without labeling things. Of course, I packed up my inhaler. So I went essentially 24 hours in being exposed outside in an environment that triggered my asthma. By the time I did receive my inhaler the next day, after we, unpacked all the boxes and I dug through and found it, it was already too late for me. So this was during an episodic period where, the cloud cover created a longer term for the pollution to be outside. And so this was day 2. The air quality went from like orange the day before to red this day. And, I got up to go to school. I told my mom, like, I can't breathe. She told me to stay home. My brother left. And I remember getting really worried. I was worried. I didn't want to worry her. I'm being a tough man, didn't want to show any weakness. So I told her I was fine and she could go to work, even though I, was really struggling. And on my way up the stairs with my bowl of cereal, I passed out because I was not getting enough blood in my brain. Luckily, my brother, he missed the bus. He found me, unconscious on the floor, and he called the ambulance. Ambulance took me down the street to McKeesport Hospital, which was less than a 5-minute ride from where we lived. And from the time I got to the hospital, from the time they had gotten me from my house to the hospital, I had actually died. So they had to resuscitate me. They shocked me. They brought me back. And from McKeesport Hospital, I was life flighted in a helicopter to Children's. When I arrived at Children's, went immediately into a coma. Like, my room was filled with doctors. They wouldn't let my mom in. The last thing I remember was fighting this nurse who was trying to stick this thumb-sized pill of Tylenol up my behind because I had IVs in both my arms, up here, down here, both arms, and in my legs. So there was literally no more veins for them to give me medication. And I was, fighting with her. And so I ended up causing some complications and they had to put me under. When I woke up 2 weeks later, I had to learn how to walk again. I had, trouble comprehending what people were saying. I went in around like 160 pounds. I came out of that coma at around 120 pounds. So I lost, significant amount of weight. And it was a really traumatic experience for myself and, for my family. When I got out of that, experience, of course, I got a short little lesson in air quality. So I learned about, AQI and what that meant. And essentially the doctor was like, well, if it's, orange or red outside, you need to stay in the house and you shouldn't play sports. You should try not to go outside. And so that kind of really flipped my world around, because before then, air quality was never something that I paid attention to as a serious threat to my asthma. And I also learned that my asthma was now classified as life-threatening. And what that means is essentially I am one bad asthma attack away from dying. There's so much scar tissue on my lungs that it does not respond to the medicine effectively anymore. And the doctor was saying that, if I happen to have a really bad one, there's no guarantee that I'll be able to make it out. And I'm just really lucky to be alive. So here I am now with life-threatening asthma. I thought it was growing out of it. And, it completely changed the way I have to treat and live with my symptoms. So what does that look like now? So typically when you go to the hospital for an asthma attack, at least speaking for myself, you get the same treatment. So you get liquefied albuterol, something that's called a nebulizer, right? So they will load up this liquid albuterol and essentially they turn it into steam and you inhale it. Typically you'll do 2 vials every 4 hours. That's the typical treatment. Plus, painkillers, whatever other type of medication that they're looking at, and steroids to help the muscles in your lungs. And, that treatment that was only kept for emergencies at the hospital is now something that I have to do in my home on a regular basis, at least once a week, because my asthma is so bad. No longer do I take a daily preventative asthma inhaler to, help with my symptoms. I have to take my emergency inhaler to treat my symptoms, every day. So I'm taking it multiple times a day, and I'm taking these, albuterol steroids. Essentially, my doctor said, if you would like to live a little bit longer, and be healthy, you should move, because, the environment is going to trigger your asthma. So the only advice that I was given was to run away, never return if I wanted, my health to improve, or suck it up and, continue to take increasingly large amounts of drugs just to operate like a normal person. It's definitely a scary experience to have, an asthma attack. And, I was one of the lucky ones that survived, but there are hundreds of people just like me whose stories don't have such a nice, happy ending. It's never talked about. It's not in the news. There's no national outrage or outcry. And so, I just hope that I could share, this personal experience just to illustrate how important the air quality issue is, but also how deadly it is. If you're not adequately prepared to deal with the consequences of living in these highly polluted areas that we call home, like Pittsburgh. So I just, wanted to share that little bit of perspective, coming from, I guess, an asthma patient, someone who's experienced this on a daily basis. And I appreciate you, Howard, and, everything that you guys are doing here, for giving me the opportunity to come online and share a little bit of my personal testimony. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Qiyam. Next up, we have Kathleen Skotnicki. Kathleen, please go ahead and introduce yourself and
okay.
Take it from there.
Hi. Yeah, my name is Kathleen Skotnicki, Kathy, and I'm a lifelong resident of the Mon Valley. I have a degree in biology with a minor in environmental science, and I'm basically here to speak because I have a 23-year-old son who lives in Portview, and for all the other residents of the area. I recently moved to the North Hills in the last few years. And in an ironic twist, I went from fighting just the Clairton Coke Works to now fighting also the Shell plant. So But growing up, I grew up on Patterson Hill, which is in Lincoln Borough. Now it's called Mabel Drive, but it is across the river from the plant and slightly south. And whenever I was growing up, there was a ridge directly across the river from the plant, and it was nothing but a rock face. Nothing would grow on it, and there were rock slides and boulders that would come down and block Glassport Elizabeth Road. And that was commonplace. And I can remember riding, one of many, many times down that road with my father in the car and having the windows rolled up and having my nose and my throat and my eyes burning, and being able to smell that sulfur stench from the coke works. And whenever I would complain about it, my father would say, "Hey, look, stop. That's the smell of men working." And that was the view that a lot of people had at the time. Yeah, I've seen what it can do. And I don't believe that people should have to choose between a good paying job and their health or their lives. Yeah, I wish I could count the number of people that I've known either on Patterson Hill or in the area that ended up with cancer. There was a lot of asthma also, but there was a lot of cancer. Both of my parents had cancer. My mother had 2 types of cancer and she survived both. My father had 1 type and he died due to his cancer. I had an aunt that lived next door to us, and she also had 2 types of cancer and survived both, but they all suffered a lot. I also had a cousin who grew up in Glassport, and she ended up being misdiagnosed. She had a rare type of cancer that was misdiagnosed because they hardly ever see this cancer in anyone under 60. And she passed when she was 44. And her mother, my other aunt, also had 3 types of cancer. And unfortunately, she died in her last fight with cancer, that 3rd type of cancer. Yeah, it was nothing to hear. Anytime anyone got very ill, the first question was, is it cancer? And yeah, the rate of cancer is still high. It really hasn't changed. There was some hope in the 80s when the steel mills started shutting down, and there were different regulations. And at the time, the Coke Works, US Steel, decided to actually invest in equipment to, reduce their emissions, which was surprising to a lot of people. They did do some layoffs, but they ended up in the long term hiring people back. And surprisingly, yeah, the air started to get cleaner and that rock face started to get green again. But now it seems like we're going backwards. And we can't go back. We just can't. It's unbelievable to me that, that the fire happened, that they promised to do all of these renovations and then they bail on it. US Steel, has been around since the early 1900s. They are a multi-billion-dollar company. That Coke Works, from what I understand, makes hundreds of millions of dollars a year in profit. I don't think it's because they can't pay for renovations. I think it's easier and it's less expensive for them to pay the fines. And every time that there's an air quality alert, okay, except for we've had the wildfire smoke lately, but every time there's an air quality alert, it's always for the same area. It's Clairton, Glassport, Lincoln, Liberty, Portview, always the same thing. So what have we learned? I don't know. That they're not going to do the right thing, I think, is what we should have learned. And I've kind of, I don't know, resigned myself to the fact that because I've lived there my entire life, that I will, it wouldn't be a surprise to me to hear you have cancer. And I'm okay with that. But what I'm not okay with is, all the residents that are there now, all the generations that are to come. And we just can't go back. It's time to move forward. It's time to put a stop to this. There's no excuse for it. There's no excuse for it anymore. They can do the right thing. They don't want to. So that's my story. And I thank all of you very much for giving me this time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Really appreciate that. It's just amazing the number of times you said cancer. It's really powerful. Okay. Now, our final presenter before we have open Q&A is Dr. Gentile. Dr. Gentile, please proceed.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you, Kathleen and Qiyam. And thanks to Dr. Gentile, my esteemed colleague. And thank you, Glenn, and thank you, Howard, for this very important forum. So my name is Ned Gentile, retired pediatrician for Allegheny Health Network Pediatrics. Also on the American Academy of Pediatrics Council on Environmental Health and Climate Change. I'm president of Physicians for Social Responsibility and also medical advisor for Environmental Health Project. I've been asked to review the responses to the questionnaire that was sent out in June to the Allegheny County executive candidates, Inamorado and Rocky. I need to mention that I'm not a resident of Allegheny County, so I'm not going to be voting in the Allegheny County executive election. Candidate Inamorado responded to the questions promptly. Candidate Rocky did not, which is disappointing and somewhat surprising. The questions were not difficult. The questions were not difficult to answer. They were actually softballs. It wouldn't take much time and even specific knowledge about environmental health issues affecting Allegheny County to give short answers to every question and to make yourself look good in the process. Not answering these very easy questions, whether due to laziness, disinterest, arrogance, fear, or simply incompetence, is not a good look for a candidate for a very important and powerful office. Sarah Inamorado did take the time and very thoughtfully answered each question. Each question was set up by a brief explanation of this group's very legitimate concerns regarding the responsibilities, the functioning, and the ability of the Allegheny County Health Department to do its job to protect public health. And let's face it, the only job the county health department has is to protect public health. The county executive's job regarding the health department is spelled out under issue 1. One of the prime responsibilities of the ACE is oversight and key decision-making related to the function of the Allegheny County Health Department, the selection of its director, and the members of its Board of Health and committees. Allegheny County Health Department is being led currently by an interim director without any public health or medical credentials. Hopefully, no decision will be made regarding the hiring of the new director until the new ACE has had a chance to weigh in on this crucial step. Let's take a look at some of the responses. Question 1, will you assure that the new Allegheny County Health Director has public health credentials? And candidate Inamorado says, absolutely. Really, this is a pretty easy question when you think about it. Either you're going to make sure that the new director has public health credentials, or you won't, or you simply don't know yet. Just answer that question honestly and clearly. That's all. And again, candidate Inamorado did just that. She says, I will work with the Board of Health to find and hire someone who is clearly qualified for this job and has recognized environmental and public health credentials commensurate with the incredible unique power of the Allegheny County Health Department. It's a disservice to county residents to require anything less. So that wasn't so hard, was it? There is no reason why candidate Rocky couldn't have answered that question. Further on, she says, I will ensure that the Board of Health has representatives from Allegheny County environmental justice communities and includes members with public health, climate science, and epidemiologic experience. Let's go to question 2. Will you assure that new appointees to the Board of Health and committees do not represent our region's worst polluters, are independent and committed to addressing the health crisis that air pollution represents, the consequences of which is death or disability for far too many of us? Again, not a difficult question. Either you agree that the Board of Health and its committees should be independent and not representing polluting interests, or you don't. It's clear that candidate Innamorato thinks about the type of county government that she seeks to lead, a more honest and transparent and responsive government that works for all of us. And we know she is committed to protecting public health when she answers the question by saying, I will commit to ensuring that no new appointees to the Board of Health or its various committees have conflicts of interest with the polluting industry. Instead, I will appoint a Board of Health composed of members with strong public and environmental health credentials, including epidemiologists, climate scientists, and those residing in designated environmental justice communities who will put our health and safety first and create regulations that are based on science. Let's go to question 3, which is another softball. Will you insist that Allegheny County Health Department be responsive to community and grassroots organizations and meet directly with residents? This is a trick question, of course, because there's only one possible answer. Let's see how candidate Innamorato answers it. Yes, government can be accessible, transparent, and responsive in order to build a region where it can thrive. You should read the rest of this response, by the way, about her model of co-governance, which all of us should expect from all of our politicians, in my view. Does candidate Rocky think otherwise? He should tell the voters before the election. This was a great opportunity to do so. Again, question 4 is another softball question with only one logical answer, yet only candidate Innamorato took the time to answer it. And she says, well, the question is, will you support using the Clean Air Fund to help those in environmental justice communities who live closest to major sources of toxic emissions from the worst polluters, rather than to reduce the county's obligation to fund its own operations? Candidate Innamorato says, yes, I am strongly opposed to the diversion of Clean Air Fund money to cover more of the costs of health department operations. That money is to remediate harm caused by polluters, not to renovate buildings or to pay staff, but to repair harm in communities that need it the most. I will also work with our team at the health department and community leaders to design a process that creates a clear and equitable way for community-based organizations and public health nonprofits to apply directly to the fund for a public in a public process. I will not allow closed-door decision-making about how the fund is allocated. I will aim to get this money back out into the community as quickly as possible. Make no mistake, candidate Innamorato understands the environmental health problems faced by county residents and also the county health department's responsibilities and the need to fund the department adequately to do its job, which brings us to the 5th question. What is your plan for adequately funding Allegheny County Health Department and assuring that it carries out its environmental protection mandate aggressively? And she says Allegheny County is consistently ranked as one of the worst places in our nation for air quality, resulting in detrimental effects on our children, seniors, and communities. Our county government has a responsibility to act quickly and decisively to fund the county health department because it is the only department with the explicit responsibility to protect public health. And she goes on, currently the health department receives 5% of the Clean Air Fund's revenue for its operations, but this is a perverse incentive for the pay to pollute model. We cannot continue to allow the health department to be funded via fines as it starts a cycle allowing more pollution and therefore more fines to ensure Allegheny County Health Department should receive more funding. I will also use my connections at the state to lobby for increases in state appropriations to ensure that Allegheny County receives its fair share. And this is important too. She says, finally, we need to work with our large nonprofits to ensure that everyone is contributing their fair share to the county government so we can effectively administer all of the services our county is responsible for. Question 6, will you support the creation of a user-friendly complaint system that provides follow-up information? And the answer is simple. We have incredible resources developed by our universities and funded by our philanthropic community that county health departments should be using and should be working in partnership with these organizations to further develop, fully deploy, and make actionable. I will provide the funding to the Allegheny County Health Department necessary to do this. And then she says at the end of this, the public has a right to know what is happening around them, and I will work tirelessly to put in place systems to provide rapid information across multiple modes. And let's finish the other questions quickly. Will you assure that Allegheny County Health Department responds after meetings to public comments made during designated public comment sessions? Again, only one reasonable answer, yes. Question 8, will you assure that the health department finds a more acceptable way to respond to the smell Pittsburgh complaints and embrace technology as a data-driven crucial step toward modernizing its operations? The candidate says, yes, absolutely. As stated above, I will partner directly with the CREATE Lab, the Breathe Project, Frac Tracker Alliance, our universities, and our philanthropic community to make this happen. Question 9, will you support the creation of an effective emergency warning system for the residents of our region? And the answer, of course, is yes. It's the only logical answer, in my opinion, unless you want voters to think that you're clueless or callous or both. And finally, question 10, what steps will you take to assure compliance with EPA requirements to secure funding, hire staff to address the backlog, and install a permanent tracking system which can prevent future noncompliance? And candidate Innamorato says, we need a health department whose mission and budget are focused on protecting public health, not pursuing economic development. I will fully fund and staff the health department to ensure it meets those goals and values, including coming into compliance with the EPA requirements to address the permit backlog and install a permanent tracking system to prevent future non-compliance. So there it is. One candidate Innamorato, responded with detail, with curiosity and interest in making a problem right. And the other candidate decided not to respond at all. So I encourage everybody to look through this document one more time before you go vote in November. Thank you.
Thank you, Ned. And now we're going to go on to an open question and answer period. Just one footnote to what Ned said. All 10 of those questions, the current Allegheny County Health Department is on the wrong side of every one of them. They have failed to address any of those issues, or they've addressed them in the wrong way. So there's an opportunity here potentially, and hopefully that that can be, we can take a step forward. But now we really want to hear what you have to say. So start with some questions. And Mark, I think you're going to triage all of that.
Yep. We're just going to watch for questions. And looks like we've got a hand up from Bob Schmetzer. Bob.
Hi, everyone. Hi. Thanks for having this conversation. I think that we need to take a look at the shootings, the car wrecks, and they're not even close to causing death and disease as much as the pollution. I think that's something we haven't really talked about, and I think we ought to.
I missed the first part. What you said that it broke up, at least on my speaker. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said shootings, car wrecks are not even close to causing death and disease as much as pollution in all of our geographical areas. And we only hear on the news about the violence. But I think that the pollution is violence. And I think we ought to put that in a right perspective. How many people are dying daily of cancers and lung disease and heart disease caused by pollution throughout the geographical area? I think that this should be put in the right perspective. Let's put some numbers to it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the reality is that the pollution that, first of all, our region is ill-suited for the type of industry that developed here because of the nature of the valley, because of the nature of inversions, etc. 150 years ago, nobody was thinking in those terms. Today we know, but nobody's doing anything to address it. And the fact that we have healthcare institutions that won't even talk about it, how prevention could be a possibility, opposed to treatment. I think there's an opportunity for us all to sign that petition, which we've posted in the chat on a number of occasions. Clearly, the diseases caused by air pollution do not make the news, and that's a problem. Although with wildfires taking place and climate change, we do have a lot of discussion about pollution in general. So maybe in a tragic way, there's an opportunity here.
There's another question posed by Matt Mihalik. Over the past 10, now 11 town halls, what is the thing you're most proud of accomplishing through this forum?
I'd say the most important thing, first of all, that this hasn't been a one and done. You have a town hall and then you go on to do something else. We've been able to continue this over 2 years. I think the greatest accomplishment has been to reach the Environmental Protection Agency in a way that has really been unique. The fact that we could send a letter to them signed by 600 people, and within short order, they reached out to us and had a Zoom meeting with some of our leadership, talked about their willingness to come, asked us to actually help them plan the itinerary. We planned the itinerary for a visit to Clairton and North Braddock. And then they actually showed up on May 2nd in a very short period of time. The irony of that is that the Allegheny County Health Department director, who, well, we now have an interim director, but that director who was here for 2.5 years or so, wouldn't even get in a car and drive out to Clairton and North Braddock to meet with the people. So the folks from EPA had to get on an airplane, fly in, rent a car, drive, stay overnight in Pittsburgh, drive out to Clairton, drive to North Braddock, stand around in the rain, which was a rainy day that day. It tells you something. And so I think that was a big breakthrough. And we've had ongoing communication with them. We would like to have that same relationship with the local health department. We'd like to have that relationship with the movers and shakers in this region who actually could do something to address this problem, but are somehow wrapped up in what I call, in quotes, conspiracy of silence.
Howard, there's another follow-up question that I've got here, which is, what will be the next steps with the EPA?
Well, the next step with the EPA, from our perspective, is that when we visited North Braddock. We visited a group of people that were meeting in the municipal building there. It was a graduate class of Masters of Design students from Carnegie Mellon University who had been asked by North Braddock Residents for Our Future to develop a concept of what Braddock could look like at some point in the future. It's a very expansive and very ambitious plan, but nevertheless, they had a significantly large architectural rendering of what things could happen in the community. And while we were there, Adam Ortiz, the administrator of EPA Region 3, said, you know, the EPA is obviously an enforcement authority, can make a difference. In addition, it's also a grant-making authority. And we have money to grant, and we would like that to be granted in short order to environmental justice communities that are looking at plans that could be implemented in a quick fashion. So that raises the broader question, which we plan to deposit with the EPA Region 3 folks right after this town hall, actually. And that is to get a grant from any governmental authority, federal authority, you could say state, local, doesn't matter. But now we're talking the feds. It's a complicated process. You got to go through applications. You know, these community organizations don't have staff. And if they have staff, it's minuscule. And they don't have the capacity to do this and do all the other things they're doing. And in addition, if you are lucky enough to get a grant, well, then you got tremendous reporting requirements. And who's going to do that? And how are you going to be able to cope with that? So you could end up in a kind of catch-22. You know, you might get the money and then you can never do anything but respond with forms. Or the EPA could perhaps consider, maybe EPA Region 3 could be a forerunner in this, of setting a pattern that would streamline that. I mean, these wouldn't be major grants, but maybe North Braddock could get, you know, a modest grant to help do the first stage of this project. Now, the first stage they would like to do is to take a dock area where currently boats could dock. It could be a put-in area where they could have some placemaking, so to speak, for that community. You know, have a little bit of a fair there, have a farmer's market there, et cetera. How could that be fast-tracked? And how could we eliminate all of the burdensome reporting that would be required? Otherwise, it's an empty promise to say we're prepared to give these grants, but you need to have a major institution here that's able to accept them and do all the reporting. So I think that's the next outreach to EPA. We're also waiting to hear from EPA, and this isn't Region 3, it's the broader EPA, on what penalties are going to be assessed on Clairton Coke Works and U.S. Steel for that debacle on Christmas Eve in 2018, when a football-sized portion of that facility blew out. A couple people, I think, were seriously injured, maybe killed. I don't remember that. It was a very downsized staff because of the holiday. And it took 16 days for the Allegheny County Health Department to let anybody know what was happening. And then 100 days allowing that facility to operate without any air pollution control equipment. So we're waiting to hear on that. Now, there's not much we can do about that now. That's all in the works, but it will be very interesting to see what that comes down as. Will it be just another pay to pollute opportunity, or will this be a real significant slash at U.S. Steel?
Thanks, Howard. There's lots of great comments in the chat. I want to encourage everybody to go read through those. I'm going to stay focused on the questions. And then also I wanted to highlight that we received several responses to the petition, but the link is in the chat there. And I really encourage all of you to sign that petition. The title of today's event is Better Together. And petitions are one of those things that we can really do better together. We're all gathered on this call together, and to the extent that we get on here and sign the petition and then share it widely, that'd be great. So to that end, Penn Hackney is asking 2 questions, Howard. May we pass around the link to the petition? And may we post the link to the petition in public spaces and social media?
The answer is on both scores.
Yes, on both scores. Yeah, and Joe answered also in the chat. So yes, yes, yes. Please share. Okay.
Can I pose a question to Ned? Because I'm kind of curious, as you know, with his stellar credentials and the medical field. We talked a bit about, more than a bit about, Glenn did, about the unwillingness of UPMC and AHN to even sit down and have a conversation. I've even suggested it could be just a closed door conversation. We can't even make that happen. So as somebody who's a leader in the field and cares about these issues, I'm just curious what your reaction would be.
Well, thanks for asking. As I mentioned before, I am employed by Allegheny Health Network Pediatric Institute, and I'm not authorized to speak on AHN's behalf, and I'm not going to even begin to weigh in on UPMC's non-response either. I'm not here to defend AHN, but I will say that from what I can gather, AHN is for the most part run by and staffed by pretty good people, pretty decent people. I write the Pedia blog, which is a popular pediatric blog. I post something on it every day. And I write a lot about environmental health issues, including health impact from air pollution, from fracking and cracking, petrochemicals in the environment and in our consumer products, and also impacts from climate change. And AHN has never, not even once, objected to any of my essays being published on these topics. In fact, plenty of folks at AHN have even encouraged me to keep writing about these topics. So I just think that air pollution and environmental health, it kind of sounds strange to coming in Pittsburgh, but it's really not on the administration's and the board's radar. It's a topic that's certainly not in the wheelhouse of the people who you sent the letter to, but that shouldn't really be surprising. These people tend to be more, business people, less medical providers. It's disappointing to me that the letter was completely ignored. At the least that you could have expected was a written acknowledgement that they received your letter and they were considering each point carefully. I can only speculate why that letter wasn't sent to you, acknowledging receipt of your letter. But I would be surprised, actually, if it was arrogance or malice or someone's political agenda that was involved. I could be wrong about that. Ignorance and disinterest about the topic, maybe. There's a lot of that going around, isn't there? I would suggest that maybe you send this letter out every month. Just put a tickler out there and just make sure that the media is getting a copy of the letter and that they get a copy of the response. I think sometimes if you see it enough, maybe you respond to it. I don't know. I'm not going to make excuses.
Thank you. Mark? I will mention, by the way, I think that a past CEO of U.S. Steel sits on UPMC's board. And, they found their way onto the boards of both Carnegie Mellon and University of Pittsburgh. So there are practical reasons why some of these things happen.
So we've got a question from Walter here. Is it possible for the Allegheny County Health Department to protect the air and water as long as the Marcellus Shale is drilled and fracked and coke works continues operating? Question. Is it possible to protect the air and water with those activities happening? Thoughts from Howard, or if the other speakers want to weigh in, just raise your hand up. And then we'll take the question from Brian Juice after that.
I'll just make one quick question about Clairton Coke Works. I think that the people that I have conversations with who have some knowledge of the industry from the inside are betting that the Clairton Coke Works is history in the next couple of years. U.S. Steel has signed on to some supposed initiative that they hope to achieve by 2035, which won't solve our problem. They have no reason to continue to operate that facility. They'll just keep running it into the ground. The question is, what would happen to that facility? A worse operator could take it over. And, so there is an opportunity. There was, Shenango Coke Works closed down a whole bunch of years ago because of community pressure and because it was a smaller facility and it was operated by a Detroit operation that didn't have the kind of commitment and history that U.S. Steel has in our region. But the reality is that that's a possibility. I don't think that the fracking, et cetera, is going away anytime soon. But clearly, U.S. Steel used to be the largest corporation in the world with 275,000 employees. When I first moved to the Pittsburgh area in 1981, there were 125,000 members of the United Steelworkers hanging out here. Today, we got a few thousand employees. So we're a shadow of what we were. And there's a chance potentially to make that difference, at least at that level.
Great. Thank you. Yeah. So Brian, go ahead. And then we have 2 more questions and maybe more beyond that. Go ahead, Brian.
Okay, I just have a quick comment. On May 9th, 2023, the Board of Health held a public hearing regarding the use of clean air funds. To date, no comments or responses have been made available. This is July 18. This exemplifies the lack of transparency and the inability to address air quality issues, consistency with conviction or commitment at the Allegheny County Health Department. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for your continued advocacy as well. I see you at those ACHD advisory meetings and for years. So yeah, and Brian has done a lot of work around wood smoke pollution as well. He has some amazing stories to tell about that. Howard, there's a couple more questions. One is from Abhishek, who is the ex-CEO of U.S. Steel that who's on different boards. Do we know who that is?
I could check that out.
Okay. Yeah. All right. We might get back to you, Abhishek. Thanks for that question. And then Jermaine asks that she'd like Qiyam to share a little bit more about his advocacy work. And yeah, Qiyam, can you pop back on and give us an update on what kind of advocacy work you're up to lately? I know that he's been working, leading up VCAN, Valley Clean Air Now, and they've done quite a bit around air filtration work and then also air monitoring work. Really some extraordinary efforts to get air filters out into the community, pursuing funding. It looks like Qiyam might be occupied with something else right now, but Qiyam, if you're there and you can hop in, just pop back in. We'd love to hear from you about what kind of advocacy work you're up to lately. Let's see, I think that
the name of the person on the UPMC board is John Surma, S-U-R-M-A, retired chairman and chief executive officer, United States Steel Corporation.
Great. And Tiffany Allen asks, if someone is experiencing smells, how can someone express or detail them if, comment about that if they don't have the Smell Pittsburgh app? So if you don't have the Smell Pittsburgh app, then first thing to do is to consider downloading the Smell PGH app at smellpgh.org. You can find it there. But if you do not have the app or you don't have a smartphone that can support the app, then the Allegheny County Health Department has a website And we can perhaps drop a link into the chat. They used to take phone calls. They may still. For a while, there were some questions about whether the ACHD would take air quality complaints via phone. But I would say, without better knowledge, and if you do not have any other way to submit a complaint, then I would definitely try to submit your complaint to the health department via phone. I think it's their civic duty to at least attempt to provide a place where people without computers or smartphones can submit air quality complaints. Any other additional comments about that, Howard?
Well, my additional comment is you can file the complaint, you rarely get any response. You never get any information about how they might have dealt with the response. I just kind of think about the classic situation with Allegheny County Health Department when the Metallico metal processing plant, basically, grinding up cars on Neville Island, caught fire, a year or two ago, when people were calling Allegheny County Health Department asking what to do. Did they need to evacuate because it was so horrible? They said, well, you should be calling the fire department for information. I mean, they don't even want to meet their own responsibilities. And if you do end up, if you're lucky enough to have a computer, and you get on the online system at Allegheny County Health Department to file a complaint, you end up in this complete black hole, which leads nowhere, which takes 17 different steps to file the complaint. And then you never know if it ever went anywhere. So it's unfortunate because, I don't think, to borrow the phrase that Ned used, I don't think there's a lot of staff people there that have ill will and want to do a poor job. But the reality is the political direction at the top limits what they're able to do. And the fact that they're not staffed appropriately to do the job they need to do is part of the issue. The fact that Title V operating permits can be years and years and years behind because they don't have the staff to process them. It's unacceptable. I mean, it's outrageous, basically. But that's our county, and hopefully there's a better day ahead.
I pasted a link that takes you a couple clicks away from, so you have to click on a couple buttons. You have to click on request service, file a complaint, and then click on health department, and then click on air quality. So, you got to click, and then log in, and then click, and then you can file a complaint with the health department. That's the current way that they've set up to allow people to make complaints. The nice thing about the Smell Pittsburgh app is that it's, even if the health department doesn't respond to it, and they probably won't if you submit it to the Smell Pittsburgh app, the Smell Pittsburgh app is largely by and for community members. And so it gives community members all around the region real-time information about what other community members are finding with respect to smells in and around the community. And also it also includes air pollution information. So you can see what some of the regulatory grade monitors are reading around you. This information can be really, really handy in figuring out whether the air is good, bad, or downright ugly and stinky in your area in real time. And so you can check the app by just clicking into it. But then if you submit to the app, then you've helped everybody else in your community get the same information that you have. And it creates this sort of feedback loop that creates momentum for us to track our grievance in a way that is publicly accessible, established for the ages, and that also the health department can look at anytime if they want to, because it's freely available to download and open and or look at the app anytime, 24/7, 365, with just a couple clicks. So definitely check out the Smell PGH app. I'll put the link in there in the chat for that as well. I think looks like there's been some sharing on Facebook. Yep, and I think that I don't see any new outstanding questions. So I'd say, Howard, go ahead and let's wrap this up.
Thank you, everybody, for participating. We really look forward to continuing to move forward with the agenda, reaching out to EPA, reporting back to you, and scheduling another town hall in a couple of months to hopefully be able to work towards some meaningful changes in our county. So thank you all for being here, and thank you to those who reported, particularly to Kathy and to Qiyam for those heartfelt presentations. And listen, it's motivation to keep doing what we're doing. So thank you all. Have a great night.
Yeah, thank you all for everything. Thank you, speakers, for your heartfelt stories. So powerful, so important. We want to keep sharing them. I put in another link to the petition. I'm going to stick around if you want to stick around for a couple more minutes. If you want to go ahead and sign that petition and then check back here in the chat and report that you've signed, you're welcome to do that. I'll stick around for just a couple more minutes. But we'll definitely know and be grateful if you do sign, and then go ahead and share it widely online, social media, Facebook, Twitter, wherever else you want to and can, where it makes sense. So with that, I'm just going to close out with our sponsor slide, but thanks everybody very much. It's a great program, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. This 81-year-old is proud to be working with you guys. Good night, everybody.